Robot cats with laser eyes. Need I say more? The Clockwise Man by Justin Richards was the first in the new series Adventures range, which kind of killed off the Past Doctor Adventures and Eighth Doctor Adventures. It was released on the 19th of May 2005, which, if you know your Doctor Who timeline well, was a couple of months after the first episode of the revival. So what Justin Richards and the other writers for this range had to do was essentially write these Doctor Who novels without really knowing what the characters were going to be like. Obviously, they would have had access to behind the scenes work from the actual series, but for the most part, they wouldn't have really seen fully finished episodes and fully finished stories, especially not all of them. Justin Richards is an extremely prevalent writer within the world of Doctor Who. He has written so many books and audio stories. You can't ever read them all. I'm not personally too familiar with his work. The only things I have read are the Doctor Who fairy tales, and there's some of those are really good. The Garden of Statues is my personal favourite, so if you can get your hands on the Time Lord fairy tales, I'd definitely give that one a read. But from what I've heard, Justin Richards is decent, nothing too crazy, but this is the first proper novel that I have read of his. So The Clockwise Man, The Monsters Inside, and Winner Takes All came out only a couple months after the first episode of Doctor Who, in between Father's Day and The Empty Child, so you know, somewhat towards the end of the series. You could pick these up for, at the time, $5.99, which is insane. I would love to pick up Doctor Who books for $5.99 now. I've also got the hardback release, which I believe would have come out before the paperback one, although I do tend to favour paperback books. Although I took this one with me if I was going out and about to read it, just because obviously it's a bit more protected. There was also a release which removed Rose and just had Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor, on the cover. I couldn't really tell you why. The Clockwise Man is set in 1924, and Rose and the Doctor are on their way to the British Empire exhibition for some reason. Out of all the things the Doctor could have chosen, he decided, let's show Rose the British Empire exhibition. Something I don't think a lot of British citizens would be particularly fond of revisiting. But either way, you know, British Empire exhibition, that's where they're going. They witness an attack on a servant named Dixon and become ingrained in an upper class community of painted masks and Russian czars and deposed leaders, eventually culminating in a alien conspiracy. I won't go into specific plot details, but I will pick out the most intriguing parts. That's upside down. Right off the bat, after saving Dixon from his attacker, we are introduced to 12 different characters, which is extremely overwhelming, for me specifically. The first chapter, like I hinted at previously, involves a kind of clandestine meeting of all of these powerful upper-class officials, government officials, deposed leaders, like I mentioned, and a mysterious painted lady, as she is referred to. With these kind of books that introduce so many characters right off the bat, I struggle to know who's important. I obviously know now, having finished the book, which characters were more important than others, but when I read that first chapter, I'm trying to remember all of these characters, whether they're important or not, because I don't know whether they're going to become important later. There are some characters who are never mentioned again and they leave the meeting, but I don't know that when it starts. So I feel like I have to remember all these characters, and it's very overwhelming to start with. If this book spread these introductions over the first few chapters, it might be a bit easy. I mean, there are still characters that keep getting introduced, which is, again, even more overwhelming. But if it spread it throughout the book, or throughout the first third at least, then it might have been a bit easier. It might just be a personal issue having to remember all these characters. It might have something to do with the fact that I usually read a book over multiple shorter sittings rather than a few longer sittings. So in that way, I read a chapter and I haven't really become introduced to a character that is being expanded upon throughout the whole first few chapters, if that makes sense. So if I read it all in one, then it would be a lot easier, but because I'm having these breaks and I might forget a few details, then it becomes even more difficult. The main plot follows this painted lady that I mentioned earlier. Her real name is Melissa Hart, and she is not who she seems. She is from another planet. She covers her face due to a botched surgery that these aliens have to do in order to fit in with human society, and she is hunting a deposed leader who is hiding away on the Earth with 2 protectors, although they don't really know they're protectors. These protectors are called Ask and Repel. Ask thinks he is the deposed leader. Repel thinks he is the protector. They don't really know who they are, and they're also not actually people, or at least Ask isn't. Ask is actually a Clockwise man. He is not the Clockwise man, although now that I think about it, I don't know if there is a Clockwise man. I suppose if there's anyone who is the Clockwise man, it is this man called Ask, but there isn't really a Clockwise man. There's a kid called Freddy who is meant to be the rightful heir to the Russian throne, who is kind of only there for Rose to do something. If Freddy wasn't involved, Rose wouldn't really have much to do. And finally, there's an older man called Wise who becomes friends with the Doctor, playing chess with the Doctor in this hotel that they are put up in while the TARDIS has been taken by Melissa Hart. And you do kind of know that there's more to this character than meets the eye. He doesn't do much except kind of talk to the Doctor and play chess with the Doctor and stroke this clockwork cat. There's a moment on page 110 when Wise notes that the Doctor has clearly been in a war, and he says that chess is much safer, and the Doctor replies with, usually, which reminded me a lot of Eleven's live chess from The Wedding of River Song. And it's revealed eventually that he is the deposed ruler, Shade Vasily of Katuria, who is essentially a genocidal maniac who did horrific experiments on loads of people on his world and other worlds. And he was eventually exiled to Earth with Ask and Repel, who didn't really know what was going on. You may think, how was he not just running away? Well, these clockwork cats, like I mentioned before with the laser eyes, they are the ones protecting him, or not protecting him, preventing him from leaving. But he uses the Doctor and Rose and their temporary fight with Melissa to kind of speed along the process of his escape. It's unclear whether these like clockwork droids are the same ones from The Girl in the Fireplace or Deep Breath. Obviously this was way before either of those, but in my headcanon, they are kind of somewhat related, potentially from the same planet, you know, in the same way that the Slitheen and Blathereen are kind of somewhat related and both from Raxacoricophila Pretorius. This could be a very similar thing. Machines created on opposite sides of the planet, but they are still kind of clockwork droids. There's even a moment in one of the chapters where the Doctor hears a faint clock ticking in a room where there's no clock, which is very reminiscent of The Girl in the Fireplace, where the Doctor can hear a clock ticking even though the clock on the mantelpiece is broken. Like I said earlier, Rose really doesn't have much to do here. It's very similar to her earlier stories like The End of the World and The Unquiet Dead. Not to mention she trips and falls almost immediately after exiting the TARDIS. The most she does is befriend the kid named Freddy, the rightful heir to the Russian throne. She kisses him on the cheek at some point and then says, "I thought that's what boys were for," which is wild. Although I'd be hard-pressed not to mention the fight that she has with previously mentioned laser-eyed robot cats, and where she swings it around on its tail and smashes it against the wall. But a lot of these moments with Rose are kind of, she goes off to do something on her own, she has a weird dream or something, nothing happens to it, she then just returns to see the Doctor. It's very weird. It's like maybe these moments were added in after the fact. Now that I think about it, the Doctor doesn't really even do much either, except for maybe in the final third. For the most part, stuff just kind of happens around them and they react to it, and there is even a whole chapter where they do end up going to the British Empire exhibition and Freddy kind of joins them in the car. It's very unnecessary. The Doctor does reveal the kind of main plot twist of the story, which you can figure out on your own. Justin Richards consistently mentions the ticking of a clock where there is no clock. Sometimes you only appreciate something when it is taken away from you. You mean my freedom? I mean more like the hum of the central heating or the air conditioning. You only notice it was there when it stops. While it's constant, part of the nature of things, it's unremarkable, just the way things are. Your brain doesn't even bother to tell you about it unless there's a chance that might be important. Is this important? Like Melissa's mechanicals, the Doctor went on. If you're with them long enough, you don't even notice they're clicking at you. Your point being? Repel demanded. Oh my god, this whole time I thought it was Ask who... I've got Ask and Repel mixed the wrong way around. Repel is the guy who thinks he is Shade Vasily, this genocidal maniac. Ask was his protector, or who thought he was his protector anyway. My point being that it's like the ticking of a clock. You don't hear it, but it's there. Only I have the opposite problem. He tilted his head to one side. Do you hear it? Hear what? Repple listened for a moment, then shook his head. There's nothing. Oh, you see, I can hear. When I bother to listen, I can hear the ticking of a clock, which is odd because... He paused, encouraging Repple to finish the thought, because there's no clock in here. Exactly, and I've been in this situation before several times recently. He took a step forwards, standing toe-to-toe with Repple, looking him in the face. And always I've been with you. Repple said nothing. His face was a blank mask, devoid of expression. You're not Shade Vasily, the doctor said. You just think you are. And he reached up and took off Repple's face. Sorry. He stepped aside, allowing Repple to see his own reflection in the glass wall behind. Really, I am. Repple just stared at the mass of cogwheels that clicked round rhythmically. It took me a while, the doctor admitted. Tiny gears and levers worked furiously, but I realised I've never seen you smile, or frown, or laugh. He folded up the artificial face and pushed it in his pocket. Bit like Melissa, really. Flywheels spun and mechanisms clicked. Oh, your voice does it. There's inflection and emotion. Very clever. Where the forehead should have been, a large multifaceted glass or crystal stood slightly proud of the mechanisms, catching the light reflected from the glass and the rippling water outside. You eat and drink and sleep, but it's all rather mechanical, isn't it? Like the jewelled mechanism of a clock. Repple's mechanized face was at odds with the tortured rasp of his voice. I still can't hear it. You live with it all the time. Perhaps they programmed you not to. The face turned slowly towards the doctor. Every part of it seemed to be alive. Only the crystal did not move, but it seemed to as it reflected the light. What am I? Repple demanded. He clutched at the doctor's shoulder, dragging him closer. Who am I? With a whir of gears and an anguished cry, Repple let go of the doctor and sank to his knees. His whole body was shaking as if he were sobbing, but there were no tears, no eyes to cry them. After this happens, the doctor and Repple, who are stuck in this kind of underwater glass cage, the doctor literally grabs this man's head, no face attached, smashes it against this glass window for it to shatter and they can escape through the water or something. And he does this with no consideration of Repple. He doesn't ask him. He just is like, he's just thinking. He grabs his head and smashes it against the window, which is, Jesus Christ, like, 9 gives no fucks. Melissa Hart is a very interesting character. She is the supposed antagonist of the book for most of it, and she wears a plethora of painted masks for the reason that I mentioned earlier. At the end of chapter 7, the Doctor and Rose finally confront Melissa in her home, and up to that point she had been a very silent figure. You knew there was something going on, you knew she was planning something, she was a very interesting character, and then suddenly she's like, you know why I'm here, and the Doctor's like, why are you here? And she's like, to kill you, obviously. It was a major letdown of the kind of suspense of her character. Once you get to chapter 13 in the final act, the pacing really ramps up as Wise, or Shade Vasily, is kind of speeding up his plans to escape. His mechanism is inside Elizabeth Tower, right at the top with Big Ben, and it is an interesting set piece, albeit extremely difficult to wrap your head around. You've got all these characters, Freddie trying to help Rose, Melissa trying to help the Doctor, but the geography around Big Ben is just impossible for me to get my head around. Freddie crawls through a window somewhat above the ground, which they all climb up towards, and then there's also this whole spiral staircase upwards, but with different rooms at different levels, and all with mechanisms inside of them, and some of them with, like, obviously one with a clock face and everything. It's very, very confusing. The overall idea was there, and Justin Richards even went as far as to go to Elizabeth Tower and explore Big Ben, which is really, really cool, but it was just way too complicated for me to understand what was going on. I got the main points, obviously, of what was going on, who was getting pushed out of the clock tower, that kind of thing. But I really try and visualize all this stuff in a book kind of going on, and I just couldn't. I had no idea what was where. So the Clockwise Man definitely has ups, it definitely has downs, it's definitely quite complicated. There's definitely some parts that could have been improved, there's definitely some parts that seem pretty strong. Overall, I think the characterization of the Doctor and Rose could have been better, but I think a lot of that is down to the fact that Justin Richards probably didn't really know what they were going to be like, so he wrote them relatively tamely, especially Rose. The Doctor definitely has the kind of Nine's temperament, but Rose could have been anyone. With that all being said, there were some really cool twists, if not a little bit predictable. Repple's kind of realization of him not being who he thought he was, but eventually coming to terms with that was really interesting. Rose's characterization was a little flat and she didn't have much to do, and when she did have something to do, it was forgotten about. The Doctor was quite interesting in this one. He was definitely quite extreme, which ties in quite well with him being post-Time War. The character of Melissa could have been handled a bit better, but she did become quite interesting again towards the end when she was helping the Doctor and sacrificing her robot henchman that she has. But again, the introduction of loads of characters at the start of the first chapter really confused me as well, and the pacing in general was neither here nor there. So taking into consideration all of that, The Clockwise Man by Justin Richards, I will give a 6 out of 10. I'm really excited to explore the new series adventures. As you can see on my channel, I've been looking at books in general quite heavily. I've always been interested in Doctor Who books, but never had a reason to really read them. But being able to put down my thoughts in a video is really, really satisfying. There are so many new series adventures that I will have to get through, and I'm looking forward to reading them. Who knows how far I'll get. Hopefully I will get to the end. Of course, let me know your thoughts on The Clockwise Man in the comments below, and I will see you next time with the monsters inside.